Welcome back to Sustainable Today, Successful Tomorrow, where we explore real world sustainable tourism stories that actually work. In our last discussion episode, we already shared a few highlights from my interview with Thomas, co founder and CEO of Pura Aventura, a boutique tour operator from the UK, committed to travel positive and to less traveled places. Today, I'm excited to bring you the full interview. Thomas and I talked about what off the beaten track actually means for them and how to ensure that travelers truly connect with local communities. It was such an interesting conversation, and I hope you'll learn as much from it as I did. Enjoy! Traveling off the beaten track is one of the current buzzwords, and the travel industry is busy selling this. But how do you develop off the beaten track experiences? How far off the beaten track do you go? And how do you ensure positive impact and a great traveler experience? That's what we are exploring with Thomas from Pura Aventura. Pura Aventura is a boutique tour operator from the UK committed to creating travel positive experiences with ethical design at heart. They're also a B Corp certified travel business. They're offering trips on routes less traveled in Latin America, Spain, and Portugal with locally rooted travel experiences. So, Thomas, thank you so much for being here. And to start right off the beaten track is a phrase we hear a lot in travel marketing lately. But in your experience, what does it really mean when done responsibly?
Yeah. Well, firstly, thank you. Thank you for having me in. It's great to be here. And I love your work.
Thank you.
Off the beaten track, I guess I'd sort of turn this question around on you a little bit. Actually, the first thing we need to do is it's about the beaten track. And so I suppose underpinning the whole idea of going off the beaten track is really just why do we travel? What is the purpose of our travel? And for those of us, I guess, who want to travel to experience otherness and difference and to see how other people live, where they live, then that experience becomes heavily depleted by over tourism and by being kind of on the beaten track, I suppose. So it's kind of more about just being somewhere that you can safely observe otherness, whether that's cultural, that's linguistic, that's culinary, it's physically the landscapes and so on. So I guess we start there rather than specifically, let's find somewhere completely bonkers and that nobody's ever been before and create a trip there.
Well, I think it's a good starting point. So you look at off the beaten track to the route less traveled, but kind of close to the highlights, as in you're not going to remote places, what you said no one's ever been to, but how do you find a midway in that?
Yeah. So it's almost, I mean, I guess there can be two ways around it, but one of the ideas we have is the same road, different view. So it's
Right. Okay.
oftentimes, for us, if we're going to Peru, for instance, people will always want to see Machu Picchu.
To picture. Yeah.
That's going to be, like it or not, that's going to be kind of central to an experience or central to
Yeah.
people's purchasing decision. Whether or not it ends up being their most important memory, I think is a very different question.
Yeah.
Do you sort of start with these hooks? We know that people want to go to Patagonia, right? Their expectations are going to be set in certain obvious places, defined places. Brazil, they're going to want to see Christ the Redeemer statue. And I mean, just visit Christ the Redeemer. It's an absolute bun fight.
I heard that.
I mean, there's videos of it. It's absolutely fascinating. And we've all seen it. So, I was in Athens the year before and watching sunset over the city, and it was just comical. And everyone trying to just get in front of the other one to try to get the photo, showing them alone with this view. What
Yeah.
your memory, it's this detachment between sort of your actual experience and
Yeah.
therefore your memory of that experience and your captured memory, your artificial memory that you can share. It's like, what are you doing? It's like the value in
Yeah.
this. It's
Yeah. No,
bizarre.
absolutely. And I also think that what you said is a really good point, is that the purchase, say like the motivation to book a trip is to go see the statue or to go see Machu Picchu. But you do experience that often that's not the best experience of the
Mm.
entire trip, but it's kind of the reason to go to Peru, for example.
How well are you actually communicating sustainability? We see many travel businesses and destinations working hard, yet they still struggle to talk about it.
And maybe you feel the same. You're afraid of being seen as greenwashing, unsure what to share, or just not really connecting with your travelers. We've been there with a lot of travel brands, and we get how frustrating it is. So, with years of experience in sustainable tourism and marketing, we've created something simple to get you started.
It's called a sustainable marketing scam. You just answer a few quick questions, we'll take a look, and if it's a good fit, we'll invite you for a short call to go through your opportunities.
You can start today at goodtourisminstitute.com/scam and turn uncertainty into a clear, compelling story.
Yes, but Patagonia is a good example of this because people have always heard or seen Torres del Paine. So it's very
Yeah.
common that people will come in and say, I want to go to Torres del Paine. And the first thing we do is to say, okay, why? What's brought you there? Very quickly, the conversation leads to, I want to go to Patagonia. What about Patagonia? I want to see the people, the culture, the landscapes, the kind of experience, the sort of the variety of all of these things. And almost immediately, it's apparent that the Patagonia they're describing is not the Patagonia they would find in southern Patagonia. It is the Patagonia they would find off the beaten track up the Carretera Austral, Ruta 40 on the Argentine side. It doesn't take very much digging to realize that what the things you say you like, small hotels, kind of local restaurants, all this stuff, you're simply not going to find that in the busier places. You will still find that elsewhere. So you're sort of guiding them away. But almost always the entry point is through a known item, a known element, a place.
Yeah, exactly. And then who exactly is the Pura Aventura traveler? Like, what do you think they're looking for?
It's really interesting. We've kind of been we're going through this process at the moment of adjusting profiles. So we've lived with customer profiles that follow the classic sort of ABC1, bloody blah. They drive two
Mm.
cars and have a house with a roof and four chimneys. And just observing this, we thought, I mean, look, they tend to be older, they tend to be affluent. There are certain common economic, typically demographic sort of themes. But actually, beyond that, it didn't quite make sense. This sort of the filter of economics or material stuff didn't really make sense to it. So we started thinking about profiling in terms of values. And I think that the unifying value that our clients have is that they travel with curiosity and they treat people with respect. They will treat people reasonably and well, no matter their kind of apparent standing, I guess. It's
Okay.
it's the way people talk to the cleaner. And I just observe it that they are people who treat people as people without a mindset that
Yeah.
they travel with an openness. They travel to see other people and where they live and how they live. I think there is a distinction between that and the people who travel, and they demand that their comforts be met. I must be as comfortable as I would be at home or more comfortable. So basically that the host community serve me certain things that I demand. And it's sort of the end of that logical thread. You've got an all-inclusive resort or a cruise ship, which is sort of probably the furthest reaches of the sort of travel experience from what we do. That's not to sound judgy, and I think certain kinds of people will always go on a cruise, and certain kinds of people will always go on a trip that's sort of much more connected to place. Lots and lots of us will do bits of everything. So we'll prefer, generally speaking, I much prefer something where I'm talking to the locals and I'm experiencing new stuff and my eyes are being opened and I'm learning.
Yeah, they're all looking for that personal connection with locals to wherever they travel. I guess that's what's their shared value is.
I think so. And I found out I did honestly once when my younger child was freshly in the world. We went to Grenada for a sort of all inclusive in a week in a hotel. I loved Grenada. I loved the people, but I mean, we were out of that hotel. We were chatting to the fishermen on the beach. And so, even in a sort of a nominally all-inclusive environment, those of us who are curious, constantly looking over the wall and kind of clambering over the fence to go see, how does this work? Where do people eat? What do they eat?
The majority of the travel experiences is then also, I think, around connecting with locals. Do you feel you need to really manage expectations of travelers to prepare them on how to approach that, or how does that work?
So, well, I mean, expectation management is critical to everything in terms of kind of managing specific cultural interactions. No, for a couple of reasons. One is I don't think we're operating anywhere that is that delicate. Generally speaking, we're putting people in places, we're preparing their expectations in terms of the usual things like there will not be air conditioning in this particular place, or there will be traditional architecture. The Amazons are a classic one that people think that, well, you must hermetically seal yourself in against the creepy crawlies, and actually traditional architecture is there are no walls. You essentially clear 2-3 meters land around the lodge, and then it's just forest. So it freaks people out. You manage the expectation there, saying, look, they've been doing this a while, they know what they're doing, it's okay. This is good
Yeah.
design for the environment. So there's lots of stuff whereby you're prepping people. But then
Yeah.
the kind of how do you, I suppose the question then is, how do you equip people? How do you tool people up to actually benefit? We're putting them somewhere that we think's amazing, right? We then do to kind of enable them to make the most of that opportunity.
Yeah.
There's a couple of things. One is we're pretty careful about making sure that we don't send more than one set of travelers to the same area at the same time. So there'll be a sequencing. So if there's a road trip, Patagonia is a classic one for this, a road trip down the Carretera Austral that's 3 weeks long. There'll be times when they'll cross over one another, a night or two here or there. But generally speaking, and it's very, very difficult for you as a traveler to interact with Patagonia. First time you've been to Patagonia, first time I've been to Patagonia. If we're basically driving along together, you're more familiar. I know you will speak English. We can chat about the cricket or the football or the weather or this or that.
It's not the same experience.
It's more difficult for us to throw ourselves into, look, the people here don't speak English, so I'm going to just sort of flap my arms until I get a plate of chicken or, whatever. It's kind of uncomfortable, but of course it's that we push ourselves out into the host community, into the place we are, and that's where the magic happens. That's where the memories happen. That's where the fun happens.
Yeah, and the spontaneous, like not pre-planned.
I think of our work as being as akin to the difference between a builder and an architect. Like almost anyone, if the bricks are the services within a trip, here's a hotel, here's a guide, here's a thing, and we shove it on top. That's not our job. Because in a sense, if all you're doing is booking from staff, then frankly, you're going to lose your lunch to booking.com, to Expedia, to whoever, the OTAs are going to have your lunch. AI will have your lunch. It's about it's architecture. So it's not about the wall itself. It's about the space between the walls. The opportunity for the unexpected to happen, the delightful to happen. And it's stuff that we're not booking in the kind of, you're going to have a spontaneous experience at 3 p.m. All we can do is put you in a place where actually generally visitors are less common. So people are more interested to see you. They're generally pleased to welcome you because it's cool that you're there. The impact of your travel on their lives, their economy, and so on, their well-being is positive. So you feel more welcome. And alongside that, we've provided you, look, on Tuesdays, there's a market here. Here's a really nice bar. They've got live music on Mondays. Don't worry, just walk in, sit down, ask for this. And you kind of provide an on-ramp.
Yeah.
That's like,
which I guess it's needed.
Some people don't need it. Some people just sort of walk into, oh, here's a bar in a foreign land. I'll just walk in and I'll just work it out for myself. Most people, through sort of humility, and you don't want to You don't want to impose yourself on a place.
Yeah.
Spain's a great one for this. You walk into a bar in Spain, you know, in the UK, you go into a bar and you stand there until the person behind the bar comes up to you and says, "What would you like to drink?" And you say, "I would like my drink."
Yeah.
You do that in Spain, you're there forever. I mean, unless the bar's empty. But in a full bar, you basically walk in, throw a you throw a request over heads, bodies, and somehow they hear it. And like a minute later, this glass appears over somebody's head, and to you, and if you didn't know that, you'd stand there feeling they're ignoring me because I'm a tourist and they obviously don't want me in here. So, you know, you sort of retreat out. So it's stuff like that, that actually is just, no, that it's kind of, there's simply a different etiquette. There's a different thing that happens here.
Yeah, I guess that's what I meant, like with managing expectations. Like, how do you engage with local communities, or how do you engage with the local customs in a place, for example, where they don't speak English, or where, like this in this bar, where they have like really different customs than you're used to? I mean, I think for most people, it might seem rude to just shout over your order rather than just waiting. So I think, how do you start? Do you have like a proper guidelines for travelers per destination, or how do you have these conversations with them?
Yeah, I mean, we have holiday guide notes, and so we sort of write our guides. But it's also we also have interaction with locals. So there's very few examples where you'll go on a trip with us without having some sort of connected interaction at the very beginning. So even on self-guided in walks in Spain or Portugal, the first thing that will happen is that you'll be picked up and you'll have a sort of meet and greet and sit down and so on.
Right. Okay.
So there's that sort of demystification of place, I suppose, because, oh yeah, people seem really friendly and you can watch locals interacting. So you're just getting a sense of the lay of the land, very simple terms.
Yeah.
Guided visits of cities, anything like that. Just not on a coach tour, not somebody with a flag, somebody who, it can be as simple as, how do you buy something in a shop? You know, in Chile, they have these arcane systems of a little bit of paper and you pay for that and then you get the product over here. And it's just a little bit of cultural translation at the very beginning to push people. But then also we provide as much information as we think is useful, a much sort of background information. And that comes down to the critical fact that we specialize in very few places, which sort of ties all this stuff together. I think it's very difficult to effectively identify on and off the beaten track, where there's on the beaten track, which bits we keep and which bits actually we say, there's no reason for that to be the place.
So what kind of criteria do you have to make these decisions?
I mean, it's not a scientific criteria. Fundamentally, it's personal. It's, can you meet the locals? Can you go somewhere and actually see something of life or connect to the local way of life in some way, shape or form? I don't want to overstate this. You know, it's like you're not going off to be a sort of a nomadic hunter-gatherer. So, you know, don't pretend that. But just, can you meet people who don't have name badges on? This amazing young woman, Gloriana, so she takes people back into her effectively childhood mountain. And then you have lunch at her auntie's farm up on the other side of the hill. We can't send too many people there. I mean, there has to, otherwise she becomes a restaurant, not a farmer who makes lunch 2-3 times a week or whatever. So you sort of destroy the host.
But then how you build your own itineraries, like it sounds like you're mainly following local stories. And how do you find these local stories?
So this is the inch wide, mile deep thing that we're highly, highly specialist. So and that has to be our value that we're adding, because in order to identify what's in, what's out, what's on the beaten track, what's off the beaten track, what's off the beaten track for good reason, and what's just rubbish.
Yeah. Yeah.
Some years ago in Costa Rica, for instance, I just drove the entire Pacific coast just so I could see every town, every village, every beach, just to sort of, okay, yeah, so you could understand.
To kind of feel like, yeah.
Yeah, you've got to know the positives, the negatives. You've got to know the ones and the zeros. Otherwise, you're, saying that this is a lovely beach. Fine. Is it lovelier than the one next door? Is it nicer than that hotel? Is that guide better than that one? You actually have to eat the full menu to understand what the good stuff is. To the question, how do we construct these things? Our origin story sort of was very much the people and the place, and debt of gratitude to people. And so, and you'll know this when you've met amazing people, or you've stayed in an amazing place, or you've had an amazing day out with a guide who they will associate. There's great chefs associate with other great chefs or great cooks and great food.
Yeah.
Great guides do not associate with bad guides. Great hosts, hospitality, do not associate with poor hospitality. So once you've got some, they tend to feed out. So it's just
Yeah. So you
this,
trust the network of your own network, basically.
you trust the heroes of place, because we've been working with them. They're partners of ours. We're working directly with them, always directly with them.
Yeah.
And so there's this constant feedback loop of, there's one in Rio de Janeiro. There's a new lodge that's opening there that is friends with somebody who runs a lodge in Patagonia. The lodge in Brazil isn't open yet. We've already been there and seen it. And, it's amazing, because we know that one is also amazing. And it's kind of conceived around the same model of, like, here's a precious lump of land to be protected. Here's a thing that's worthy of protection. Let's find a way of sharing it in a way that benefits all. So there's a hook. There's your grain of sand around which, all right, that takes us out of the ordinary, takes us away from the expected flow. What else is then connected? Because, sometimes these things will rise up, these things will land on your lap. It's like, oh, right, there's a bright spot in an area that's of interest, and we can do something different and interesting.
Yeah.
But having one bright point on a map that's not kind of on the beaten track, that's not enough. You've got, you're not going to dive in, drive 5 hours and drive 5 hours out to go see this cool thing. There's got to be a sort of a chain. There's got to be a sort of sequence of things. So that's when the kind of the digging happens. That's when you start to really say, look, there must be something in this area. Who do we know who knows somebody who might know something about this? And then you'll find, actually, there's a natural reserve there that's pretty cool. These mountains are really beautiful. Okay, and you dig, and you start to uncover the bright spots. Then there's often usually more. It's excavation, it's investigation, it's relationships built over time, and then it's just going and going back, and keeping.
Yeah. So it's not necessarily off the beaten track travel. It's more like beyond the ordinary, as you said. So I guess that may be the better term to describe it.
I mean, we're sort of increasingly around this idea of beyond, because it's not, this started last year. I think it was Torres del Paine and beyond. There's not, Torres del Paine is incredible. It's just that it's not everything there is.
Yeah. And then how do you do that, for example, with Machu Picchu? Because that's the highlight. How do you go beyond the ordinary in your trips? So how does it make it pure, like Pura Aventura experience?
So Machu Picchu itself, in and of itself, that's quite useful, because they still go there for sunrise, even though it's in a cloud forest, and 90% of the time, 95% of the time, there is no sunrise at Machu Picchu. It's a cloud until mid-morning, late morning. But still, boom, that's the way that things are set up. And so that's where the vast majority of people go through and pass through Machu Picchu. It's in those morning hours coming off the Inca Trail.
And I'm assuming it's promoted with a picture of Machu Picchu with an actual sunrise.
Usually they'll promote the sunrise with a picture of the sunset. But anyway, that's...
Okay, yeah, you can also do that.
These
okay,
are it's bathed in warm light.
Of course.
It's so we turn up in the afternoon. Where at all possible, we encourage people to do the 1-day Inca Trail, which is you get the train most of the way and you hike up the valley side. You join the Inca Trail and right in the last stretch, but you arrive above the site on foot in the afternoon. And genuinely, I mean, this is extraordinary. I've got photos through the years and into the past years of nobody in Machu Picchu, no visible people in Machu Picchu, sent from our clients, and not, hanging off a rock, ignoring the 1,000 people behind them. I mean, these are genuinely like, wow. Yeah. So in that sense, it's surprising. It's still remarkably easy to just look. There is a way. So again,
so even with the very, very popular highlights, it is possible if you go at a different time or a different route that you still have that different experience.
yeah, just a more sort of special experience. Because the thing is, Machu Picchu, it is such an extraordinary place. It's such an extraordinary achievement. It's absolutely beautiful. The location of it's just everything. But of course, you're going to Machu Picchu, you're going to go in and out via Cusco in some way, shape, or form, and you're going to travel along the Sacred Valley, which is the basically 100-kilometer valley that connects Cusco to Machu Picchu. And so it's sort of Cusco, Sacred Valley, Machu Picchu. Most people stay in Cusco when they first arrive. Two things. That's the highest altitude, so it's brutal on the body.
Yeah.
Second is Cusco is the biggest busy city, but it's the center of it particularly is very touristified. So if you go there, you will see the women and the children in brightly colored weavings with a pretty llama, all fluffy and shampooed. And you take a photo for $1 or $2 or whatever it is in front of an amazing Inca wall. And so your first experience of the Inca Empire is it's this confected version of it, this sort of perfected version of it. And you're at super high altitude.
Yeah.
We change the running order. So we go into the Sacred Valley. So we stay away from the main part of the Sacred Valley. And we just immerse people a bit in the local place. So you will go walking and you'll go do a bit of mountain biking. But actually the first day you're going to spend sort of in an ordinary town buying bread in a market, literally being given soles to go buy a tomato and a potato and a loaf of bread or whatever. Just so that there's some connection, some understanding. You'll have dinner with the local mate of ours who's there locally. She and her daughter host people in the house. It's humble, but people absolutely love it. This is really fascinating kind of genuine exchange. The Inca culture did not die 500 years ago. The Inca culture is alive today. It is not an open-air museum. It is a continuum. It is a cultural continuum.
Yeah.
And the first thing you have to do is just to show people the kind of
where it is.
Yeah. And for good, for bad, for ugly, for hard, it's hard. I mean, it's literally people scraping potatoes off the top of mountains at 4,500 meters. I mean, it is a brutally hard life. But the weavings are genuine. I mean, it's phenomenal. At that point, by the time our people get back to Cusco, they've seen the fancy finca with the beautiful kind of relics and artifacts, but whose family were killed by the Shining Path. Right, so the haves who lost in the sort of land reforms and the violent years. They've seen and interacted in some way, shape or form with people who've never had a bean, or they've got a couple of potatoes to rub together kind of thing. They've seen the craft of the women and the weavers. They've seen the people the shepherds wearing the weave. They're not sparkly clean. You don't go out and buy a new weaving every week.
Right.
They are sort of passed down.
It's like experiencing the actual culture, like it's happening today and no stage experience or a better one.
But then when you get to Cusco and you see the woman and the child with the weavings on and the fluffy llama, you have a context to place that in. So you're not sitting there thinking, oh, isn't that cute? This is how people live. You're not sitting there thinking, this is just some tourist crap. You're thinking, oh yeah,
it's combination.
That's actually a thing. I get why they're doing that, and that's cool. I would do that rather than scrape potatoes off a hillside if that was every day of the week. Yeah. So it's that it's that sort of how do you prepare people actually to have more interesting, more meaningful sort of engaging experiences. It just requires some thinking and engagement at product design level rather than just selling what's easy to sell.
Yeah. And do you feel it's harder to sell this, like what you're doing, or do you feel it kind of comes naturally with as soon as you engage like in a conversation with those that are interested?
Yes, I think, when the conversations happen, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
But obviously to get people to start this conversation, to find you, that's harder. You're choosing the hard path in every dimension. As you know, the classic model of tour operator is that you're effectively a portfolio of product that is given to you and is defined for you by a ground handling company in destination country, whereas we're going past them and we have to go off and farm our own ingredients, where other tour operators are essentially working off a menu of pre-prepped meals, of ready meals. So it's just quite simply easier for them to transact. They're typically transacting things that are better known. They're more familiar. not the simple path.
No, no, I can imagine. But then how do you approach this? How do you try and promote your way of traveling? How do you sell it online?
A lot of it is word of mouth, repeat, asymmetrical stuff. It's not like the product. The marketing isn't suited to a sort of classic pay-per-click model, sort of acquisitional model of print advertising, online advertising, whatever. Because if you're selling a blue widget, frankly, you can use a fairly straightforward form of sort of promotion and marketing. But where your sales are predicated on conversations and engagement and curiosity at heart, you have to sort of create environments and situations where this conversation can happen. And it's just that, actually, just get somebody really interesting, sort of associated with somewhere we go, and then people talk. And, that's the kind of that constant, value add. How do we do something that's actually coming to, not sit in a room and we'll sell you a holiday?
Or are you selling experience? But then you're doing that mainly offline, what you said, like you do events, you encourage mouth to mouth.
Yeah, I think increasingly, that's the way. But it's a complicated form of communication because, of course, it can't be one thing or the other in exclusivity, because particularly if you're selling something unusual, unknown, your name has to appear various times, multiple times. So the face-to-face might be one of the late-stage interactions you have, but typically there'll be a press article or an advert, and/or word of mouth, and/or it's a whole suite of activities that sort of builds up over time.
Yeah. And then, for example, if that happened for a specific off the beaten track destination that you offer, have you noticed like an increase of interest from other operators, for example, the same area after this happened?
We
or
don't. Well, that's it. Are we special? I mean, look, no, you don't know. That's the thing. Like a rising tide lifts us all. So it's difficult to get real information. So, I think you got to read the tea leaves a bit. One thing that gives us a decent idea of it, we often work with hotels that have literally 4-6 rooms. And we know at peak times of year when we can find space, so there's that sort of internal gauge that says you wouldn't have got a room in that place for that time of year. So we've sort of, I guess we've got that sort of internal barometer. That's quite interesting. But it doesn't tell us what's happening in the 200-room hotel further up the road, but it gives us some.
But you know what's happening like in the smaller communities that you go to.
Yeah. And if the big places are full, then that will tend to sort of push people out into the smaller places and less obvious places. So I think there is a relationship between the occupancy rates of a big place and the occupancy rates of a little place in some way, but it's not necessarily directly causal. So, you're slightly foolish to place total confidence in those things.
But then has it ever happened that, for example, a more remote location that you don't really feel it still fits your Pura Aventura values now that, for example, a lot more travelers are coming in?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, our original destination was almost exclusively Torres del Paine. So we'd do the W treks, we would do and it just became too much. It was the promise of going to Patagonia and experiencing something special was being replaced with just walk nose to tail with somebody else and sleep in an overcrowded bunk room. So we kind of walked away from it. And really last year, as we were coming up with this beyond concept, we went back specifically to work out, okay, how can we do this place justice and also deliver value for our clients? And that was to keep some Torres del Paine, but actually to say, wow, there's incredible places around and about and nearby. So just diffusing. So I mean, we definitely drop places when they're too busy, or when change of ownership or change of attitude to own it. I mean, we like to think that we're really good partners. We get a lot of feedback from our partners about our clients. So that happens in reverse as well. We've got loyal clients who've done lots of trips and they're like, that place just wasn't very pure. And so you observe it, stuff happens. But yeah, fundamentally, if they're just not delivering the service or they're not being good partners, they're not as good as they were or whatever, then we move on. And so that closed. So there's always that.
But there's a lot of
If we
personal connection that you have with your local partners.
Yes,
That's very clear.
but there's a sort of downside to that, which is it's human. There are relationships in there are lives in there, and that sort of, it gives it the beauty, but obviously it carries a high risk, because we're not going there saying, right, this is exactly the shape of the trip that will happen. We are,
Yeah.
in a sense, we're building it out from there. We're saying, okay, what are you sharing with us as visitors? And if
Yeah.
a piece of that is no longer available to share, then well, tough, frankly.
But do you feel that's one of your biggest challenges in developing or offering your beyond experiences, to always having to navigate who is where and to build these new relationships with communities and to keep that steady?
No, I wouldn't say it's the main challenge. It's a thing. Yes, we have to. But the people we're working with are professionals. They're dedicated and they love it. And because it's often happening on a very small scale, you're often connecting to a passion of theirs, a particular interest of theirs. So it's, they're not prone to simply upping and leaving or saying, actually, I don't fancy this anymore. I don't want to be a guide anymore. I've got something better. They do tend to be very solid long-term relationships that we build and maintain. There is attrition at the edges for all sorts of human reasons, but fundamentally they're very sound, constant relationships
Quality.
based on respect. That yeah, we'll treat you well, we'll pay you well, we'll pay you on time, we will be good partners to you, and we will send you clients who have been well prepared, so that
Important.
you're actually having interesting conversations. I mean, as a guide, speaking from personal experience, if you get the same sort of complete blank canvas every day, it gets pretty boring, because you're talking about sort of a really low level. Okay, this is a tree, and that's a beach, and that, somebody who's arrived with a little bit more prep around, okay, they listen to some podcasts about the current political situation here, or a historical podcast here, or they've been listening to this music, or they've seen this film, they read a book. The conversations just become much more random and enriching for both sides.
And focused on conversation and cultural exchange, maybe.
Yeah. In addition to, there's a monkey, or there's a potato farmer, or there's a
obviously.
lynx or whatever. Yeah, but it provides a sort of richer for a conversation.
Yeah. And do you also get that back from your travelers? That's something that they really value, like from the overall experience that they have?
It's always the people. It's always the people.
Always to people. Yeah, we're
Always the
getting back to that.
Always the people. No, but I mean, it's the same with all of it. Yeah, I went to see Machu Picchu, but you know what? I had this crazy night in a bar, and I met this person, and we ended up going back here, and this happened. Nobody ever remembers the postcard view.
No.
They remember the gaucho that stopped and, invited you in to sit mate looking at the scenery. So there's sort of, the scenery is the backdrop, but the actual stuff, the beating heart of it all, is personal.
In your communication, you have a strong emphasis on these stories. How do you, for example, collect these stories? How do you actively get these stories out of your travelers to also use that to share it with new travelers?
We ask them, but also I think generally they appreciate that personal thing once they've been there, because often they'll get there. You can't sell this, but you get somewhere, and the place you're staying says, "Oh yeah, no, they're lovely, they're great. They're we've worked there for 10 years, and they lots of them are friends." And so when our clients go there, and they're the hoteliers naming the names in the office and the people and the stuff, and they're like, "Oh, we've sort of fallen into this network of trust." And so actually, when they're sharing stories, it doesn't come across as, now we need you to provide feedstock for our social media feed. It's actually, they're sharing stories of kind of stuff that's happened, transformational stuff that's happened. And it's amazing. I mean, there's, you work in travel, and people's reasons to travel and reasons not to travel, they can be pretty powerful, emotionally powerful. They can be pretty inspiring. And so, again, all coming down to sort of people, personality, relationships, they seem to share willingly. And so actually now I think there's quite a focus on just connecting to our partners a lot more, and because they're there every day, all day, every day. We're constantly getting stuff in from the people on the ground, which again is very difficult for our competition to emulate.
How
it,
so?
because they don't have the direct connections. They're buying off the menu. They're buying the ready meals.
Yeah, yeah.
So they literally don't know the name of the person who's going to pick their client up from the airport, or they don't know the name of the guide who's going to be with them, showing them around Buenos Aires. We do. And not only that, but we've got photos of, oh God, there's an empanada competition going on in Palermo. But, so sort of proof point, I suppose, that, yeah, look, there is no middle person here. It's directly
Yeah.
at the coalface kind of thing.
I think what you said, like you can facilitate these genuine connections because you already have them locally. I think that's the key aspect here. You've invested quite a lot in knowing these people and really valuing them, know them personally. And yeah, by doing so, you're allowing your travelers to do the same.
Yeah, so it's like brokering an introduction in many ways. I
Yeah.
sort of think if a typical sort of value chain in travel is actually point to point, sort of 4 or 5 points along a line. Whereas I always think of ours as the triangle, it's us, partners, clients, and we're getting the right people to the right places, but we're brokering those introductions effectively. So it creates a very different dynamic on just sort of pushing business up and down a supply chain. It's, it's all crunchy, hippie. But actually, I think it's the sort of the why we travel thing. It's look,
People.
the people we would want to travel with us. I think that why we travel is somewhere in and around people, not tick lists, not so that I can say I've been somewhere, not to share it on Instagram or Facebook or whatever. It's people. It's there's something. There's a curiosity that drives us to go and have conversations and just understand otherness in all its kind of wonderful otherness. It's just, I love it. I love it.
I think what I really noticed also like in this interview is, I think you said that yourself, you're not the typical tour operator. You're really focused on where they go beyond, not to take menu and to really force these genuine connections. So both yourself and your travelers. So yeah, and I think it's been really interesting to unravel like how you do things, and it's not as you don't really go off the beaten track what is to remote places, but more just beyond the ordinary to actually meet the people. And I think this is actually what we maybe need more to, because we always talk about sustainable tourism has to be good for people, planet, but is it actually responsible if you don't know who is actually on the other side? So I do think that this personal connection is a lot more important than what the tourism industry thinks at the moment.
Yeah. I mean, look, how can we travel in a world where actually where we go, people are happy to see us. We are welcomed as guests. That's kind of what we all want.
Absolutely. I think that for most travelers, that should be the ultimate end goal. But do you have any last advice for travel businesses trying to navigate a bit more towards the same?
I mean, look, right, sustainability by design, don't sell it because nobody's buying it. Nobody's searching for it. As Milena Nikolova, a behavioral scientist who did some work with a Travel by B Corp, nobody ever asked Mercedes for an airbag. You're just getting it. You're getting it. So you build it in, but it can be anything. It can be really small. Final thought, this was me speaking to, I'm sure you know Edmund Morris at Equator. He did some sort of mapping of group tours in Jordan. A fascinating map with sort of, here's where people spend their nights, and here's another place in the south where they spend their nights. And then he lines between them when they travel past to go stay here and here. And then he mapped over areas of extreme poverty. And all these group tours were going straight past areas of extreme poverty, not stopping. So if you were to do one thing, and it could be as simple as one thing, stop for lunch halfway, because $5 spent in an area of extreme poverty in the middle of Jordan is massively impactful. And if that, honestly, the ripple effects of that alone can be massive. So it's just applying the mindset. Look, what wins can we have? What quick wins can we have? But don't get caught up in the kind of perfection. Don't get caught up in, it's not for marketing. It's for quality of experience. So just do a better job of actually delivering on the promise of travel.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. Thank you so much for sharing all this. It's been very interesting. Yeah, and I really look forward to following more of your work. For now, thank you so much for joining.
I hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as I did. There's a lot we can learn from companies like Pura Aventura, especially their way of building local relationships and how this shapes genuine connections. If you're enjoying the podcast, like and share this episode and subscribe to our channel to not miss any of the upcoming episodes. Thank you for listening, and I hope to see you next time.